much. It's very gratifying to be with you here in Korea to start off Global Entrepreneurship Week. The birth of Global Entrepreneurship Week was about 13 years ago. It involved myself and Gordon Brown, who was about to become Prime Minister of Great Britain. And in both the US and in the UK, we found ourselves creating new programs to introduce entrepreneurship to young students. We thought this was such a good idea that we thought we would take it to the rest of the world. And I stand here today shocked that this week 180 countries will start entrepreneurship weeks in their countries in order to bring the notion of how to start a new business, how to make a job and not take a job, how to renew an economy can be the dream of everybody in every society. So it gives me great pleasure to be here to talk with you. This is the one place in the world I will be this week to talk about, if you will, my baby, Global Entrepreneurship Week. Now, as I thought about what to say, it occurred to me just 2 days ago, I visited the DMZ, and I looked into North Korea. And through the course of my visit, people said again and again, our collective national dream is to unify the peninsula. Now, most people in the foreign relations community think that's likely, not very likely. But as I thought some more about this, it's only 30 years ago this week that probably an even more unlikely event happened. It was the demise of the Soviet Union and the liberation of hundreds of millions of people into free market economies and the democracy that goes hand in hand. As we think about this, I would like to think that it's actually in many regards a new type of warfare. The Berlin Wall fell largely because the people on the other side began to know what life could be like in a freer society, but a richer society. And in fact, I think it was back then that we began to see a different form of conflict emerge. It's a conflict about who controls ideas and how to convert ideas into businesses. It's back then that we saw the power of widespread innovation in the hands of a group of people whose names we didn't even know at the time. We never in English used the word entrepreneur. It was not part of our vocabulary. But as we see the world today, we think of entrepreneurs as the people who actually generate a great deal of the new wealth that other countries look to, covet, envy. We know this in many regards because your very close neighbor, China, works very hard to suppress knowledge about how people in the rest of the world live, their freedom, their standards of living, and how they get to become rich, namely through the entrepreneurial process. I know this is the case because I know the contest we have with the United States and China right now is pivoting around the question of who owns ideas. In our case, funded mostly by our government and huge companies, there is a plethora of brand new, wonderful, creative ideas that other countries feel they can come and take and profit from these ideas. It's fundamentally unfair. On the other side of this coin, however, we want everyone in the world to have increased standards of living, and most importantly, as Global Entrepreneurship Week tells us loud and clear, we want entrepreneurship to be part of every culture in the world, so every nation can spawn its own great ideas and know how to take those ideas and make them into commercial successes, and with those commercial successes, to grow the wealth of their countries and improve human welfare. Entrepreneurship is nothing less than that great, great ambition of making the world richer and improving human welfare. Now, unfortunately, how we go about it is not working as well as it should. For over the last 20 years, as we become more conscious of the power of entrepreneurship, as governments have thrown more and more resources at helping people think about becoming entrepreneurs, it turns out that we've had a disproportionate return on our money. In the United States, as we began to use the word entrepreneur, as we began to understand something special was happening in the Silicon Valley, and then as we began to develop entrepreneurship curriculums in almost every college in the United States, a very surprising phenomena happened, a phenomena denied by many people, particularly in academics and in the government. The number of new businesses on a per capita basis continues to fall. What's wrong? We're devoting resources. We have professors teaching entrepreneurship. We have venture capital funds floating all over the world. We invent this idea of accelerators and incubators, and yet the number of new firms until very recently has fallen precipitously. Let me give you the dimensions of that. In the last 20 years in the United States, the number of new firms has fallen 30% on an annualized basis. Something is wrong. Moreover, these numbers are not restricted to the United States. Europe, which has followed the United States in formalizing its commitment to entrepreneurship, in building out other university programs, in hiring faculty to teach entrepreneurship, has experienced an even more severe fall-off in the creation of new businesses. Something's wrong. What could it be? I recently completed a study called Burn the Business Plan, and I studied how it was that we were teaching entrepreneurship or inducing entrepreneurship. And I think one of the most startling findings from American data, which I've confirmed elsewhere in the world, is that the average entrepreneur is 39 years old when they start their first business. This raises a huge question. By the way, that number is higher in Europe. It's higher in South America. America is actually on the low end at 39 years. This raises a huge question, and that is, are we spending and focusing our resources properly on teaching youngsters how to start businesses? Now, let me be clear. I think it is altogether critical, as global entrepreneurship's initial and original and continuing goal continues to be. That is, young students should know about how businesses are formed. They should know who entrepreneurs are in the history of their countries. And most importantly, they should understand that they can become entrepreneurs. When I was a young man, in grammar school and in high school, we thought of all our great inventors in the United States as dead people. Edison had invented the light bulb. Westinghouse had invented our network of electricity. Andrew Carnegie had invented our system of making steel. Vanderbilt had invented our system of railroads. Alexander Graham Bell had invented our telephone. We had all of what we needed, and the people who gave it to us were all dead. It was not until Steve Jobs and Bill Gates came along and began to push very hard on what we know to be personalized computing that the world had this huge explosion of productivity and creativity and the democratization of the ability to make new ideas, and with it, the ability to build giant companies. No one in the world now thinks certainly in the United States, that the people who give us the great new dimensions of our future are dead people. They're very much alive. But importantly, most of them start their journey as entrepreneurs much later in life. In my own case, I was a professor at the Johns Hopkins University. I was happy as a professor. What could be a better job than to be a professor at a famous university, a globally famous university? And then one day, doing research, I had an idea that I knew instantly had to be made into a business if it was going to succeed in changing the world. Professors' great ideas can't change the world as easily as great ideas in business. That's why we invented business in the first place. So I was, surprisingly, 38 years old, and off I went to a different career. And it was actually only when I began to look at the data, which are very obscure, people don't pay attention to this, that I understood it was typical to start businesses later in life. So what does this one piece of data tell us? I think it tells us three things that are of immediate consequence to policy, but most importantly to the young people in the room, very immediate to the career choices you make. The first thing is, perhaps studying entrepreneurship is not the smartest thing to do. Our most successful source of new entrepreneurs who have higher success rates and much larger successes when they start the businesses are trained as engineers and as scientists. They are not trained in our business schools, and they are not trained in entrepreneurship programs. What does this tell us? Perhaps we're focused at the wrong point in our production of knowledge for individuals. If people start businesses in middle age, perhaps that's where we should focus government policy and have just-in-time learning to help people understand what it is they've gotten themselves into. The second thing is, we have to come to a different understanding of innovation. In the normal business school approach to teaching entrepreneurship, we have a spell that's called opportunity recognition. You want to start a business? Go find an idea. The reality is, when you study tens of thousands of entrepreneurs who are successful, they didn't set out to become entrepreneurs. They set out to farm an idea that they had had. They were overcome by their idea. In the book, I described my own history as having been ambushed by an idea, overtaken by an idea, overpowered by an idea, to the point where I had to start a company. That is the more typical approach. Now, where did the ideas come from? In my case, it came at my desk working every day as a professor. For the majority of people who have their great ideas in their 30s and 40s, it comes the exact same way. They've worked for a big company for 10 or 15 years, and in the course of their work, they see there's a better way to do something they know a great deal about. In one of my previous books, I said the entrepreneur's job is to do something better, faster, and cheaper. And in many ways, the best school on earth to learn how to be an entrepreneur is to take a job in a large company. Happily, Korea is chock-a-block with large companies where you can go, learn how to do business, learn how engineering happens, learn the cycle of innovation, and have ideas of your own that could be developed separately. The last point I want to make, which is very important because we have government people here, is what should government do? In the last day or two, I've had numerous people from government agencies, both in Korea and elsewhere, say to me, what should we do? Or, say to me, you should hear what we're doing. My distillate of what I think government should do is not worry about the micromanagement of entrepreneurial ecosystems. Just like a business, all businesses develop organically. There's a reason I wrote a book that calls itself Burn the Business Plan. I don't care if the template came from Harvard, that it's 11 steps that start with the innovation of an idea, the discovery idea, and 11 steps later end with an exit. I want to assure you that most people who start businesses do not do that in order to get rich or to have an exit. That's the conversational style of venture capitalists. Real entrepreneurs do businesses to patrol an idea, to develop an idea, to commercialize an idea, to change the world to serve humankind with their idea, and then get rich if it's successful. I have seen many hundreds of entrepreneurs who work away, this is much more typical than you think, for a decade or two before their idea clicks and they begin to remember what it was they did and why it wasn't such a bad idea to start their own company. So let's go back to what government can do. The most important single thing a government can do has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. It is to see to macroeconomic growth. Why did the Berlin Wall fall? It's because the United States economy grew and became powerful and became more powerful. It was the policy of the United States government, as it was under President Eisenhower and under President Reagan, to be so powerful economically we could deal with the Soviet Union. And in the course of developing that approach, our consumer standards of living became so clearly superior to the rest of the world, people on the other side of the wall wanted in on this. It's economic growth. And let me assure you, it connects to entrepreneurship. As I say in my book, it is so much easier to start a business, an entrepreneurial business, a risky business, when an economy is growing at 3 or 4% than if an economy is in recession or it's in slow growth. Why do you think in the United States we produce so many more entrepreneurs than in Europe? And the reason is Europe has committed itself to industrial policy, of protecting giant companies, of treating entrepreneurs as small and medium enterprises. The very words in English say these are companies that will never challenge big companies. But we know that the very term entrepreneur, as it was developed by Joseph Schumpeter at Harvard, came with the phrase creative destruction. It's the entrepreneur's job to refresh the economy by threatening big companies that don't work as well, aren't as efficient, don't produce as much innovation as they should. And that's why you have an economy that continuously bubbles along, where startups can eventually threaten and displace older companies. Watch it happen in the United States right now. We all know who General Electric is, but there's a very good chance in 10 years General Electric will be about a memory. Entrepreneurs are right now stewing up new visions of the economy that the engineers at General Electric can't see. And it's not just General Electric, it's other companies, many other companies will be displaced. The longevity of an American company right now is shorter than at any time in history. Big companies are Fortune 500 companies. And that is largely because we have a program of policy in the United States that permits growth, that makes it safer for entrepreneurs to take the risk in a growing economy, and then have a license to displace anybody in their way. We don't have industrial policy. industrial policy is anathema to entrepreneurship. So the point of government's job is basically to make the economy grow, and then second, make the economy friendly to entrepreneurs. And how do you do that? The evidence is very clear from around the world. You reduce regulation. Trust your entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, just like big businesses, don't go into business to poison the environment, to cut corners. They have to deal with consumers who demand sustainable products. They have to deal with consumers who want cheaper, better products that make their lives more convenient. In the end, we have to remember what the entrepreneur does. He or she births the new. They take the risk. They see the opening in the market that has not been served. They take their idea, nurse it at a high risk, seek the capital to develop it, put the teams together, and if they're successful, all of us are better off. Now, this makes economists, even in the United States, very nervous. It makes government policymakers very nervous. It makes politicians very nervous. Everybody wants to govern, everybody wants to plan, everybody wants an economy that comes out the way it's supposed to come out. But our economies would never have come out this way if somebody planned it. By their very nature, they are chaotic. They are organic. Every company is organic. The company I started, I intended to sell data that could improve the management of clinical services and efficiency in America's hospitals. 3 years later, I sold the company to a bond insurance company, not knowing that hospitals sold debt to build their new buildings, and my data was all of a sudden the gold standard for judging creditworthiness. We call it a pivot in business schools. We say, oh, entrepreneurs have to pivot. I rather think the more honest way of dealing with it is entrepreneurs have to live every day with chaos. And the best thing government can do is reduce the number of restrictions on their decision-making and to make policy that makes macroeconomic growth continue to the point where demand curves keep shifting out and people can afford the new. Last point I'll make. A colleague of mine, Amar Bade, has written several enormously important books on entrepreneurship. He's a grantee of the Kauffman Foundation. And I think perhaps one of the greatest insights he had, linking macro policy to entrepreneurship, was to describe the American consumer as a venturesome consumer, someone ready to take risk, someone who is quite ready not to save all their money, to live with lower amounts of money in the bank for a rainy day, somebody who believed in a future that would continue to grow and prosper. And it's always best to think optimistically in these terms. Venturesome consumers. They certainly characterize Korea. You can't come to Korea and not see a consumer economy where people are constantly trying the new. Some of you are taking pictures of me right now on phones that were invented here. You lead the world in all kinds of innovation in this area. And you actually lead the world in terms of connecting those innovations to consumer products, which is an enormous resource, an enormous asset in a society. So I close by saying, I hope that Korea will continue to be a beacon in this part of the world, but I don't want to sound like I'm here from the State Department. I hope Korea will be a beacon to the whole of the world in terms of its economic growth, and its understanding that it shouldn't follow everybody else's dumb ideas about how to stimulate entrepreneurship, but think about it in chaotic terms. Think about what you do for your very talented mid-career entrepreneurs. The world doesn't have a model for this yet. And think about how at a macroeconomic level, government policy says, We have to grow this economy on behalf of our nation's entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
네, Professor Shram, could you be here on the stage for Q&A session? Yeah, for a moment. On the stage, please. Yeah. 네, 칼 슈람 교수님께서는 기업가 정신이 결국에는 이제 비즈니스 플랜을 만드는 것이 아니라 어떤 혁신을 이뤄낼 것인가, 그리고 거시경제적으로 정부는 거시경제에 도움이 될 기업가 정신과 창업 정책을 만들어야 되고 개인과 기업가들은 개인 차원에서 할 수 있는 비즈니스 혁신을 이뤄내야 된다. 이런 취지로 말씀을 해주셨습니다. Could you take the receiver, please? Yeah. 저희가 지금 심플로를 말씀을 드렸는데 그 부분이 아마 작동이 되지 않는 것 같아요. 그래서 칼 슈람 교수님께 질문을 이제 하시고 싶으신 분들은 현장에서 질문을 받는 것으로 그렇게 하겠습니다.
저는 사단법인 도정관 나눔 이사장 이금용입니다. 과연 어느 나이 때 어떤 시점에서 기업가 정신이 제일 많이 발휘되는가? 예를 들면 어떤 경우 보면 하이스쿨, 유니버시티, 그 다음에 대학원, 또 신입사원 시절, 또 예를 들면 뭐 한 40대 이렇게 전체적인 어떤 인생의 주기로 볼 때 어느 시점이 교수님이 보시기에 가장 기업가 정신이 왕성해지고 또 그 이유는 무엇인지 그걸 좀 말씀해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
His question is about what is the critical time to enhance entrepreneurship on the lifetime, such as age and such as position and something like that. What is the critical time, the best time to foster entrepreneurship inside myself? When is the best time to enhance the probability to be successful in entrepreneurship, in terms of entrepreneurship?
It's a very good question for which there is no real answer. It varies by person. So Steve Jobs was very young. I have backed companies started by people who were 21 that are successful. On the other hand, I have backed a company started by somebody who was 60. And we're watching in the United States, actually, the curve continuing to shift out so that among retirees, people who are retired, there's more and more starting of businesses in people who are over 65. Now, nobody predicted that. It goes to my thesis of how chaotic our policy is. But I think if from an investor's perspective, let's say, okay, I would favor, of course, it's the idea that is important, but it's the individual that is the really important person. The phrase in the United States is, you bet on the jockey, not the horse. Okay? And I think the most convincing entrepreneurs I have known and invested in are people in their late 30s to 50. But it also depends on where they come from. Because, as you know, you don't know, but I was trained as a labor economist. And sometimes in the course of a career, you don't really know your career. You don't know your profession. You aren't really contributing to your profession until you're 10 or 15 years in. Think about this in biomedical research. There's a reason people win Nobel Prizes for the research they did in their mid-40s. Nobody wins a Nobel Prize for the work they did when they were 21. On average, it's in their 40s, and some prizes are higher. So it's a case-by-case basis. You'd never want to say to my daughter, who's an entrepreneur, she's 29, no, you're not an entrepreneur. Well, she is. But I never encouraged her because I don't think that's the right thing to do. And I think it's very dangerous to go encourage people to be entrepreneurs. Let people find their way in the society And what's really important about this, because I speak about this in my book, is, you know, it's often said that failure is the greatest teacher. Well, that might be true, but it's not true in entrepreneurship if you look at the statistics. People who start a business in their 20s and fail never, ever start another business. And I think that's particularly sad, because what it says is something in their personality was ready to take a risk, to go try something, but they were at the wrong time and they didn't know enough. And it was so frightening they would never do it again, right? I'd say one other thing in case there are any business professors here who teach on campuses. I go to campus to campus to campus. Students are always ready to show their great idea. They're so proud of their great ideas. Their great ideas are always the same from every campus, year to year to year to year. Let me give you an example. I think I've seen 10 times on 10 campuses over a course of years somebody who's developed a telephone app that they've got connected to an electric frying pan, and it tells you on your app when your eggs are cooked. Now, our ancestors were living in caves, cooking eggs on hot stones 4,000 years ago. We didn't need an app, right? But the students are so excited about this, and it will never be commercially successful. And now why is that? It's because at 19 or 20, think about this. They've lived at home for 18 years in one city or one village. Then they're on campus. So the most frequently encountered idea for a great new business is delivering pizza or cookies at 2 a.m. in the morning to dormitories. Of course, it's the world they know. It's not a technical idea. So the technical ideas come much later when people have actually been in command and developed their own individual understanding of some part of the technological universe, and they know how to make it better. It's a great question. Thank you. I wish I had a good answer.